It's Mr. Allen, Social Studies. I miss y'all. I know y'all miss me. This is going to be our YouTube channel, so get used to it. As a matter of fact, subscribe right now. Like right now. Like right now. Like right now. Subscribe. I'll wait. I'll wait. Don't look at me, subscribe. Alright. So what we're gonna do today, I'm gonna be doing this real quick and real fast, so don't trip if I'm going too fast. You can press pause. Alright. What I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be going over this 13 colonies. We need to get rid of this, we need to be done with this, and we need to move on. So I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'll go over the notes that we did in class for the 13 colonies. All right. So I'm going to give you a minute, or as a matter of fact, pause the video so that you can get your notes out from the 13 colonies that we did in class. If you don't have it, it's cool. I'm going to give you everything you need in 5 minutes. All right. So get you out a sheet of paper. You can pause it and you can get out a sheet of paper. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the 13 colonies, all right? We do understand that there are three sections, all right, that we're doing. We're doing the New England colonies, Middle colonies, and the Southern colonies. New England, Middle, and Southern colonies. Anybody remember what were the New England colonies? I don't hear nobody. But anyway, yeah, so the New England colonies. We're starting with the New England colonies, starting with Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. All right, so first of all, let's start with Massachusetts. Remember, Massachusetts had two parts. You had Massachusetts Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay. Remember, there were two sets of people that came on the Mayflower. There were the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They settled in two different spots. All right, so the Pilgrims who went to Massachusetts Plymouth, and the Puritans went to Massachusetts Bay. Let's go back. Massachusetts Plymouth. All right, founder of Massachusetts Plymouth, William Bradford. Remember that, William Bradford. Remember, they was on their way from England. They was trying to get to Virginia, but somehow or another they ran into a storm and they ended up in Massachusetts. And that's where they settled with Plymouth. You should have studied that or read that last week. So that's Massachusetts Plymouth. Then you have Massachusetts Bay. Massachusetts Bay leader was John Winthrop. Remember that? John Winthrop. All right. So Massachusetts started growing, started moving, started expanding. People were coming over because you got new settlers, you got new people looking for new land, looking for new jobs, all that stuff. And then even about the indentured servants. Remember I said indentured servants, the people that was coming to work for their freedom. So Massachusetts grew so big that then you got New Hampshire. All right, New Hampshire. I know I skipped Connecticut, I'm coming back. New Hampshire. So New Hampshire, the founders of New Hampshire were the settlers from Massachusetts. I know you remember that. All right, so you got Massachusetts Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, New Hampshire, third, Connecticut. Who was the leader of Connecticut? Thomas Hooker. All right, Thomas Hooker. All right, so you got Massachusetts Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and then Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in the Union. Rhode Island. The leader of Rhode Island was Roger Williams. All right, Roger Williams came over here. He wanted to give people religious freedom. He wanted people to be able to worship or believe whatever they want to do and practice whatever they wanted to, whatever religion they wanted to. And remember, we talked about there is a law that we have now that came from that First Amendment, freedom of religion. There you go. All right, so real quick, New England colonies, Massachusetts Plymouth, Pilgrims, William Bradford, Massachusetts Bay, Puritans, John Winthrop, Connecticut, Thomas Hooker, New Hampshire, settlers from Massachusetts. Rhode Island, Roger Williams. You got it. Moving on. All right, let's move to the middle colonies. What were the middle colonies? The middle colonies were New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. I know y'all remember this. So let's start with New York. What was New York called before it was New York? Right, New Amsterdam. Who found New Amsterdam? It was a Dutch man by the name of Henry Hudson, where we get the Hudson River. All right, so it didn't start off as an English colony. It started off as a Dutch colony. And he was a trader, he was a merchant. It was popping, people were coming, they were moving over there, they came there to trade. England saw it, and this king saw it, and he wanted it. What was that king name? King Charles II, right? So King Charles II came and took it from Henry Hudson. He took it from Henry Hudson, but then he gave it to his brother. What was his brother name? James II, right? Duke of York, where we get the name, boom, New York. All right, so it goes from New Amsterdam, this Dutch colony, to New York now, which is an English colony. But James II got it, and he said it's too big. So he cut off a piece of it and gave it to two other people. What were their names? Lord John Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. All right, and that piece that he gave them is called what? Right, New Jersey. All right, so you got New York, New Amsterdam that started off as New Amsterdam, turns into New York because King Charles took it from Henry Hudson, gave it to his brother, James II, Duke of York, takes a piece of that, give it to Berkeley and Carteret, and that's New Jersey. So now we got New York and New Jersey. Next we have Pennsylvania. All right, Pennsylvania. What was that man named that was the leader of Pennsylvania? That Quaker, looked like the man on the Quaker Oaks box in the William Penn. Right. So William Penn was a Quaker. All right. Remember I told you the Quakers were the one that helped the slaves in the Underground Railroad. All right. So William Penn was a Quaker. He wanted to go where they can, worship freely and let other people do the same thing. Not just Quakers. Protestants, Catholic, Jews, Anglicans, whatever you are, even the Indians. He even said the Indians should be left alone, even though they didn't leave them alone. So there you go. There's Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania started popping. It was growing, it was growing, it was growing. And guess what? It grew and spilled over to another colony named Delaware. All right. So the founders of Delaware were settlers from Pennsylvania. Got that? Real quick. New York was found by Henry Hudson. New Jersey, John Berkeley, George Carteret. Pennsylvania, William Penn. Delaware, settlers from Pennsylvania. That's your middle colonies. All right? So now let's go to the southern colonies. All right? What was that line of latitude that separated the northern colonies from the southern colonies? What was that called? Boom. The Mason-Dixon line. All right, 1763, 1763 is when they had this imaginary line that separated the northern colonies, which is the New England colonies and the middle colonies, from the southern colonies. What were the southern colonies? All right, so the southern colonies were Virginia, Maryland, the Carolinas, and Georgia. All right, so let's start with Virginia. Virginia was that first settlement. Remember, you should have just read this about a week ago. What was that first settlement in Virginia called? Not Roanoke. You know that didn't last. Jamestown. All right, so Jamestown. John Smith was the one that came in and made it work because Roanoke didn't work. Everybody died. They came there and they didn't know what they was doing. They just starved to death, and some went back home. So they came back and they said, listen, we got to get this right. John Smith said, I tell you what, while everybody looking for gold, we're not doing that. You don't work, you don't eat. Remember he made that law? No food, no work, no food. So that's when it started growing. Then they started growing tobacco. And when they started growing tobacco, they started getting some of those Indians as slaves. They was working those, and people came in, they started growing. All right, so that's where you get Virginia. Then you have Maryland. All right, who was the leader of Maryland? Lord Baltimore. All right, he was an English nobleman. And just like William Penn, the Quaker, he wanted to come to a place where the Catholics can have a freedom of religion. All right, and that's where they made this act of tolerism, root word of tolerism, tolerate, meaning we're going we can be able to do our religion without anybody persecuting us. All right, so there you got Maryland. All right, next we have the Carolinas. Remember, the Carolinas started off as one settlement, but ended up as two. All right, it began as the Carolinas, but it ended up as North Carolina and South Carolina. What year did the Carolinas split into North Carolina and South Carolina? Right, 1729. Remember that. You're going to hear it again. You're going to see it again. 1729, the Carolinas became North Carolina and South Carolina. A group of 8 noblemen ruled these Carolinas. 8 noblemen, all right? And so the North Carolina had the more richer, they've been there a while. They started establishing their farms, but then the South, they had these large plantations. That was a vocabulary word. What's a plantation? It's a really large farm. But who's going to work it? Right, slaves. They had to start getting slaves. Where did they get the slaves from? That's right, the east coast of Africa. They go up the east coast of Africa. They gathered slaves to come to the Carolinas to work these plantations, live on and work in these plantations. All right, that's Carolinas. Last thing, Georgia. All right, Georgia was led by a man by the name of James Oglethorpe. James Oglethorpe. Oglethorpe, Oglethorpe. Right. So what was Georgia, whole purpose of Georgia? The problem is that they had a law called the English debt law. And the English debt law means that if you were indebted to somebody and you didn't pay them, you can go to jail. But if you go to jail, how you gonna pay them back? So he created or found this settlement where a place where people can come and work off their debt instead of going to jail. Now it started off as a debt state, but it ended up a slave state. All right. So real quick, Southern colonies: Virginia, John Smith; Maryland, Lord Baltimore; the Carolinas, a group of 8 nobles. All right, and Georgia, James Oglethorpe. You need to remember those. Again, if I went too fast, all you got to do is rewind, write it down. All right, I'm going to give you some further instructions when we're going to Zoom. This is going to be a test. All right, and I need you to make sure that you subscribe and always look out for this.